In this lesson, I'm going to show you how you can build an Excel form to register accounts payable and accounts receivable with installments. The idea is very simple. You can type a description, choose a category, enter the total amount, select whether it's income or expense, type the date of the first installment, and choose the number of installments. Then, when you click the registration button, Excel will automatically create all installments entries for you. It will split the total amount into equal installment amounts, keep the same day of the month for the next entries, and generate the installment sequence, like installment 1 of 12, 2 of 12, 3 of 12, and so on. You can also track the payment status later by selecting OK from a drop-down list, and Excel will turn the cell green automatically. Now, let's build everything together step by step. First, I'm going to create the header area. You can click the number 1 on the left side to select the entire first row. Then go to the Home tab, open the Fill Color menu, and choose a dark blue color. After that, click cell A1 and type a title for the worksheet. In my example, I'm going to use Installment Account Registration Form. Now you can select the title, text, and change the font color to a lighter color so it stands out from the dark background. Next, move your cursor to the border between row 1 and 2, then click and drag downward to increase the row height. This gives you more space for the title. Then you can increase the font size and, if you want, apply a bold or a italic formatting. After that, click row 2 to select the entire row. You can change the fill color to create a thin accent line below the title. Then move the border between rows 2 and 3 and drag upward a little bit to make row 2 thinner. That already gives us the sheet cleaner and more professional header. Now we can build the input form itself. I'm going to click cell B4. This is where I will start the registration section. We can type registration as the name. Then on the row below, we can enter the fields labels one by one. So let's say in cell B5, we can type description, and in the next column, we can type category, and then total amount, and then type, and first installment date. And finally, in the last column, we can have number of installments. Those are the main fields we need for the form. Now let's format the form and test it with a sample data. First, I'm going to widen column B a little because the description usually needs more space. You can do that by placing your cursor between columns B and C, then clicking and dragging to the right. Now we can click cell B6 and type a sample description. For example, land financing. If you need to, you can also widen the column again. And next we can click C6 and enter a category. For example, I'm going to use financing. The category should be a short and easy to identify. Now we can move to the next column and enter the total amount. I'm going to use 30,000. Then we can format this cell as currency. With the cell selected, we can go to the Home tab, open the number format menu and choose currency. Next, we have the type in cell E6. This will contain either income or expense. And since I'm in this example, I'm using money going out, I'm going to use expense. But instead of type it manually every time, we can create a drop-down list. So we can click cell E6, then we can go to Data tab, and we can click Data Validation. In the Allow box, we can change any value to list. Inside the source box, we can type income and expense. However, be mindful because we need to use comma to separate those two options. Then we can click OK. Now we can see that the cell has a drop-down list. So whenever you need it, you can simply choose between income or expense. Next, let's add a automatic colors for this field. We can click on column E to select the entire column. Then we can go to the Home tab, Conditional Formatting, Highlight Cells Rules, equal to. In the rule, we can type expense. We can choose a red fill and click OK. Now we can create a second rule. So we can go again to column E, go to conditional formatting, highlight sales rules, equal to. However, this time I'm gonna type income. We can choose a green fill and click OK. Now the type field changes color automatically depending on what you select. For this example, I'm going to leave it as expense. Next, we can click on column F and widen it a little bit so the date fits better. Then we can click on F6 and enter the first installment date. And for this example, I'm going to use March 14th of 2027. And if this first installment is March 14th, Excel will later generate April 14th, May 14th, and so on through the macro. Now let's define the number of installments. Click G6. You can also create a drop-down list here if you want a limited range. In my example, I'm going to create a list from 1 to 12. Go to data, then data validation, and then we can change allow to list. And in the source box, we can type 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. Then we can click OK. Now you can choose the number of installments directly from the list. At this point, the form structure is ready, but it still doesn't register anything yet. We still need a button and a table where the records will be stored. So now I'm going to create the button. We can go to Insert tab, click Shapes, and choose a rounded rectangle. On the right side of the form, click and drag to draw the button. Then we can double-click inside the shape and type Register. Now you can select the text, center it, increase the font size, and apply the button style you prefer. You can use one of Excel's built-in shape styles, or you can format it manually. Now let's format the input section. Select the labels and the input row, meaning the header row and the row where the values will be entered. Then go to Home tab, center the content, and apply all borders. After that, you can select from labels and apply dark green fill with white font. You can also format the registration title above it to match the same visual style. Now let's create the table that will receive the entries. We can move a few rows down so the form and the table are visually separated. Then we can type those headers. Let's say description, category, in the next column, installment amount, type, installment date, current installment, and payment status. Notice that this table is slightly different from the form because we use installment amount instead of total amount because the macro will split the total value. We also use installment date instead of first installment date because each row will represent one installment. And instead of number of installments, we use current installment, which shows values like 1 of 12, 2 of 12, 3 of 12, and so on. And in the last column, we use payment status, so you can track whether the specific entry has already been paid or received. Now, let's select the table headers and format them. We can center the text, add a dark fill, and use white font. Then we can format the first data row below with centered text as well. And you can use a light gray font or another style that matches your worksheet. And after that, select the entire table range, including the headers, and convert it into an Excel table. You can go to Home and then choose Format as Table, or go to Insert and choose Table. Make sure the option My Table Has Headers is checked, then click OK. Now click anywhere inside the table, open the Table Design tab, and look at the table name on the left side. This name is very important for the VBA code. We can delete the default name and rename the table as TBL entries. Then we can press Enter. Now we already have the table ready for the automation. And to make the register button create all installment entries automatically, we are going to use VBA. Now what we need to do is go to the Developer tab. However, if you do not see the Developer tab in Excel, here is how you can enable it. Right-click anywhere on the ribbon area and choose Customize the ribbon. In the list of main tabs, enable Developer, then click OK. Now open the Developer tab and click Visual Basic. Excel will open the VBA editor in the panel on the left. We can right-click in the project area. We can choose Insert and then click Module. A new blank module will appear on the right. This is where you are going to paste the VBA code. I'm also providing the VBA code separately in the description, okay? So you can just copy and paste the code into the module, like I'm doing here, Ctrl+C and Ctrl+V, for example. But before you use the code, check two things carefully. First, confirm the worksheet name. In my example, the sheet name is Sheet 1. So if your sheet has a different name, you need to update the name in the code. Second, confirm the table name. We rename the table to TBL entries. So the code must use the exact name as the table name, okay? Now we need to connect the macro to the button. So let me go back to Excel, right-click the register button and choose Assign Macro. We can select the macro, that we did, and click OK. Now the button is fully functional, and we can also test it. In the form, you can enter a description, a category, a total amount, a type, the first installment date, and the number of installments. Then when we click Register, Excel will automatically create all rows in the table. Each row will contain the description, category, installment amount, type, installment date, the installment sequence, and a blank payment status. You should also see a confirmation message saying the installment register is successfully done. Now let's make a few final adjustments here. If the installment amount column is not showing currents correctly, we can select the entire column. We can go to the Home tab and change the format to currents. If the current installment column is not displaying values correctly, we can also select the column. We can go to Number Format menu on the Home tab and change it to text. That prevents Excel for misinterpreting the values. Let's say instead of showing 1 of 1, it shows January 1st. So let's create the payment status dropdown. We can select the payment status column. We can go to data, then data validation. We can change allow to list. And in the source box, we can type OK, then click OK. Now every row has a dropdown with the OK option. And to make that status easier to see, let's add a conditional formatting. Select the entire payment status column. We can go to the Home tab, Conditional Format, and click Highlight Sales Rules equal to, and then we can type OK. And this time I'm going to use a green fill and click OK. Now, whenever you mark a row as OK, Excel will highlight it in green automatically. So let's test one more example here. This time I'm going to enter a service sale. Let's say description, custom service, category, sales, total amount 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, income as the type, first installment date. I'm going to use January 15th of 2027, number of installments equals to 4. Now let me click register. The installment amounts should be formatted properly. The installment dates should follow the monthly sequence. The current installment column should be display values like 1 of 4, 2 of 4, 3 of 4, and 4 of 4. And the payment status column should be ready for selection. One final and very important step is saving the workbook correctly. So we can go to File, then Save As. We can choose where you want to save the file. We can enter a name for the workbook. Then in the Save As Type field, we can select Excel Macro Enabled Workbook, XLSM. This step is essential, okay? It's crucial. If you save the file in a regular format, the macro will not be preserved. So after that, click Save. And that's it. Now your workbook is ready. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I see you in the next one. Every day has a new video.